The Gospel according to Mark, chapter 7, verses 14 to 23. And when he had called all the people unto him, he said unto them, Hearken unto me every one of you, and understand. There is nothing from without a man that entering into him can defile him, but the things which come out of him, those are they that defile the man. If any man have ears to hear, let him hear. And when he entered into the house from the people, his disciples asked him concerning the parable. And he saith unto them, Are ye so without understanding also? Do ye not perceive that whatsoever thing from without entereth into the man, it cannot defile him? Because it entereth not into his heart, but into the belly, and goeth out into the draught, purging all meats. And he said, That which cometh out of the man, that defileth the man. For from within, out of the heart of men, proceed evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, an evil eye, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within, and defile the man. There endeth our reading. Thank you, Lord. Amen. In this second reading from chapter 7 of Mark, we have what to my mind is one of the most striking and profound lessons of the teachings of Christ. And I will do my best to share my excitement about this teaching with you today, and we'll be coming back probably once or twice to this particular lesson as we go through the Gospel year, so I'll be able to go deeper if possible in other readings later in the year. Remember, we had, I would say, a pretty dry reading yesterday when we were discussing the essentially formal dispute between Jesus and the Pharisees concerning Jewish traditions about washing hands before eating and washing pots and cups and so on. And much of that Jewish tradition is around the fear of being defiled by essentially mixing with Gentiles, sharing food with Gentiles, or being in the vicinity of Gentiles and not washing one's hands before eating. So that was a Jewish tradition of holy cleanliness, essentially. And in Jesus' New Testament, his new gospel, he was saying to the Pharisees, there's too much focus on these rituals, and in focusing on those, you've lost the heart of the relationship with the Lord. And he turns to the multitude and gives this very short lesson. And you can see that for him, for Jesus, this was a very important lesson, because he says, listen to me, everyone. Listen to me, everyone, and understand. And it's almost like he himself is so excited to share this nugget of gold. There is nothing from without a man that entering into him can defile him, but the things which come out of him, those are they that defile the man. And then he ends with his famous, if any man have ears to hear, let him hear. And we talked about that phrase a few weeks ago, about the importance of hearing with your heart, not hearing with your brain, the mental understanding of something being potentially more superficial than having a lesson resting in your heart. But this lesson, at first glance, is so counterintuitive And yet, as you start to think about it, the rightness of it only intensifies. Now, first of all, we have to deal with a trivial point, which is that by saying defile, he's not saying poison. Of course, if you drink a bottle of poison, that will poison you by definition. Defile is in the sense of corrupt. And what he's saying is that you won't be corrupted spiritually from food or drink, even if it's traditionally unclean, as it were, in quotation marks. But you can be corrupted by things that come out of you. And he enters into a house after this lesson, and his disciples ask him about the parable, and he at first is somewhat dismayed that they have not cottoned on to this teaching, because I think Jesus is a bit disappointed here, because he's already sent the disciples out to teach in his name, and I think that went very well. He was very confident. But here, with what Jesus probably saw as a lesson they should easily grasp, they failed to grasp it. Do you not perceive? Are you so without understanding also? And then he explains the parable to them. So what he says is that food and drink do not go into your heart, they go into your belly. And I love this Old English, goeth out into the draught, purging all meats. So I think what we would say in modern English would be, all food that you eat will leave your body at some point, usually in one direction, perhaps on a sort of daily basis. If it was truly unclean in a food poisoning sense, then of course it might come the other direction as well, but it's going to go out into the draught, as it were. Okay. It's not going to be within your body in a way that it can't come out again. And this is quite profound, actually, and I was wondering whether to go into this, but from a scientific point of view, there's a very nice piece of what mathematicians call topology relating to this very concept, actually, and it appears in the biology of embryo development. So animal organisms share the same architecture. No matter what shape they appear to have, we all have the same topology, which is that we're essentially a tube. We have a mouth that goes into our digestive system, and then we have an anus, and that's where the waste comes out. And then you can build around that tube all sorts of interesting creatures, like, a crab or a giraffe or a human being. But we all share that same topology of having an inner cavity which allows the passage of food turning into waste, and then an outer surface. And in between that inner cavity and the outer surface are all of our tissues, our muscles, our bones, our nerves, our organs. But we are topologically all a tube. And what Jesus is saying here, if you translate it into the language of developmental biology, is that the things that you eat are going to go into that tube and they will leave that tube again. And you will not be corrupted by what goes there. But then we get to the much more profound part, which is very interesting. You can be corrupted by what comes out of you, but not out of that tube, but out of your heart. And what comes out of your heart either comes out of your mouth as speech, or it comes out of your body, out of your muscles as actions. And these actions can be evil, and the things that we say can be evil. But what's really interesting is that even though it's going out from us, and it may have bad effect on others, it will defile us, it will corrupt us. And that, from a scientific point of view, reminds me of Newton's third law. To every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Think of an artillery cannon firing a shell. You've probably seen footage of that, and it recoils, and the men that are firing that shell have to leap out of the way, otherwise they'll be hurt by the recoil. To every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. So even though you might think, well, a person is saying something with evil intent or something evil, or they are acting in an evil way, that's going out from them. But no, also, it's having a profound effect inside them. There's a recoil, if you like. And that recoil is corruption of the person and the soul of that individual. And he gives a long list of examples of things that come out from us which corrupt us. And he says, out of the heart of men. Evil thoughts, so these might be fantasies which are corrupting and anything but wholesome, or they could be evil plans. Adulteries, so essentially lying and breaking a vow to a loved one. Fornications, and we'll come back to fornication a number of times because it's something that Jesus places very strong emphasis on. And I won't go into that now because it's not quite the right time, but we will come back and talk about the evil of fornication per se, which is not the same as an act of intimate love between people that are committed to each other. Murders, of course, thefts, covetousness, so the corrupting influence of just desire of things that belong to others. Wickedness, deceit, lasciviousness, which is essentially lust, an evil eye, so being with someone and looking at them in a way where you exhibit to them evil intent, blasphemy, pride, foolishness. There's not time and it's not quite the right place to talk about each of these separately, but there's so much packed in to this list of the ways in which we as humans can potentially or do actually act which is harmful to others, but also through this recoil, as it were, is harmful to us, defiles us, corrupts us. And Jesus emphasizes at the end, all these evil things come from within and defile the man. And I should just stress here that in this Old English, when we see phrases like "and defile the man," the word man there is being used to mean person. It's not the gender of the male. It's just people. Defile a person. So a very interesting and important lesson from Jesus Christ. And this, I think, is the ideal form of teaching of Jesus Christ, and why his lessons live on so vibrantly 2,000 years later, lived so vibrantly at the time that thousands of people would travel to hear him speak, to open their eyes to what is the relationship between us and God. And a lesson such as this, which at first glance doesn't really make much sense or seems upside down, and as you start to probe it, you see deeper and deeper into the wisdom that this Jewish tradition of worrying about what goes into your mouth, ironically, almost perfectly misses the mark about corruption, and that corruption is within us already. It's part of being human, is to have the potential for internal corruption, And you can't remove that. That's the nature of being a human being. And none of us is perfect. Absolutely not. We're all capable of something on this list, or we've done things on this list, or we will do things on this list, potentially. But Christ's teaching is that if you focus your life on your relationship with God and actively love your fellow man, you will essentially smother the growth, the infestation of these corruptions within yourself. You will limit their ability to become active and to corrupt you. And therefore, even though you're potentially capable of internal corruption, you can minimize that to an enormous degree. You'll never silence it completely because you are intrinsically a human being, but we can minimize these things to the point where they will not hurt others, and their potential to internally corrupt us is essentially negligible, if one can do that perfectly. Although I don't know to what degree for most of us, certainly not myself, as a very average human being, to what degree we can really smother these things to that perfection extent. But relationship with the Lord, relationship with Christ's word, silencing, minimizing the ability for internal corruption.